gone to a different copy because of a bad page. And here there are some editorial comments. Decentralization as enemy to traditional trades, for example. For this experiment to have been so successful, there certainly must have been strong pressures active inducing mankind to centralize itself. Let's look at some of these pressures, not only the centralizers, but the decentralizers as well, to try to find a reason for this inexorable consolidation. First, the decentralizers, the centrifugal forces, those that tend to spread mankind out as thinly as possible. Having taken a relatively long view of history, we have first to consider that man's genetic nature, his human nature, which we have every reason to suspect has been heavily influenced by 99% of its history, wants to spread to see man in groups of 50. CBA, that's my dad's abbreviations. He questions that, or he did when he read this. The idea that Homo sapiens has a natural group size is not outrageous. Virtually all other social animals have their specific ranges of group size. And the other primates have group sizes which vary among species from near individuality in the orangutan to sometimes 400 to 500 in the baboon, the other terrestrial primate besides man. In any case, as I have said before, Homo sapiens' sociability is clearly very elastic, and the most we can say for the genetic decentralist, here it is, in our nature is that it is very probable, though still unmeasurable force. Also related to group size and also appearing to be genetically programmed to a certain extent are man's aggressiveness, his territoriality, and his status seeking. Though it may be ideal shattering, it is also becoming accepted scientific dogma that man is by nature aggressive, territorial, and, if possible, dominating. A centralized state holds the advantage for the species as a whole of enabling aggression to do the least amount of damage, providing a maximum number of territories and hence providing a maximum number of positions of dominance, a decentralized state. There are two more biological factors that I want to mention which have favored a decentralized state. The first is birth rate. It appears true that most animals, true of most animals, that the less dense a population is, the higher will be its birth rate. It has only been both very recently that a high human birth rate has been a liability. For virtually all of our history, a high birth rate has been evolutionarily very valuable because it has resulted in the highest number of genotype proposals and has been essential to compete with high death rates. The second factor is that the less dense a population is, the less it is susceptible to epidemic diseases. In 1348, Europe was not yet very densely populated, and yet the Black Death managed to reduce its population by 1/3. If it were not for our miracle drugs, how long would our present dense population centers be likely to last? Aside from those dictated by man's body, there are two other interrelated factors which have tended to keep man in a decentralized state. The first is the mere fact that the biosphere is, for all practical purposes, a surface upon which riches are spread quite evenly. Neither land nor sunshine nor rainfall can be centralized, and since we need all three, man in the past has had to distribute himself similarly. In this, he has had no choice because of the second factor, namely the large amounts of energy required to transport the products of land, sunshine, and water to a centralized location, together with the relatively meager energy resources available to non-fossil fueled man. In other words, the cycles or flows of materials had to conserve energy by staying short. I mentioned that this is a foreshadowing of Wedge's paradigm, which I had not yet written. Against these forces urging man to spread himself out thinly, there are considerable and what have recently appeared to be overwhelming forces urging man to gather in large groups. Some of these centripetal forces may also claim to be part of human nature. In his book, The Territorial Imperative, Robert Ardrey proposes that a possible humanly natural explanation for the phenomenon of huge cities may be the stimulation they provide. Such stimulation may have been an evolutionarily favorable influence on Homo sapiens, or, more important, on the groups he forms. Of course, there are other ways of countering the assertion that our nature is decentralist. It is not difficult to imagine how territoriality and dominance could act as centralizers, resulting in large groups, if there should appear particularly dominant individuals, or if there should appear new technologies of dominance. Also, territoriality and dominance are certainly not limited to the individual. Groups or subgroups often attempt and succeed in bringing other groups into their domain. The waves of group dominance, like centralization as a whole, appear differently from the center and the periphery. From the center, what appears as a crusade is clearly aggression or invasion from the periphery. Such finite measure as physical distance and human time, however, eventually place limitations on an individual's or group's ability to dominate. Thus, the territorial size becomes a function of the technologies of transportation and communication. As the technologies of the tools of dominance change, territory and group sizes will change as well. Technological advances, as usually measured, can have the effect of extending territoriality and dominance and hence centralization. A centralized state, in turn, has been a state more conducive to technological change than a decentralized one. When capital and information are in short supply, they are most effective at inducing change or generating more of themselves when they are centralized. It is not a matter of wonder that educational institutions have almost always been in centralized positions. It is also no matter of wonder that the educational and research bias has been toward continuing and increasing a centralized state. This is a positive feedback loop. A centralized state tends to generate research, and the results of research tend to generate a furtherly centralized state. What centralized research institution would find it worth their while to examine the possibility of recycling farm waste for use as fuel on the farm, an activity which is essentially anti-centralist? Not until the centralized agriculture of feedlots with 50,000 head on 2 or 3 acres generates an equally centralized mountain of farm waste does the possibility become research-worthy. But there has been little room for choice in this. With the limited resources, with the limited means to disseminate information, centralized research into decentralized activities was useless. But then I say, but now there's the internet. This was an editor, I don't know when I read this last and made these comments. I think maybe I'll stop right there for today.